Okay, so now we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular equations. So first of all, we know that parallel means that two lines never touch. Okay, and perpendicular, so the picture of parallel are two lines that just run along right next to each other, but they're never actually crossing or touching each other. Perpendicular is when two lines cross and they make a right angle. That's what the little box means, is the right angle. Angle, isn't it? Okay, so we're gonna write two lines touch and make right angles. Now, how can I tell from just an equation if two lines are parallel or if they're perpendicular? Well, what are we going to look at? We're going to look at the slopes. So when they're parallel, that means that the lines have the same slope, like the same number. So like if one of the lines had a slope of 7, then the other line has a slope of 7. Okay, same number. For perpendicular, they don't have the same slope. They're going to have a flip and switch slope, which means they flip the fraction and switch the sign. Okay. So, flip the fraction means if my first fraction, let's pretend, is, I don't know, 5/6. Great. When I flip the fraction, that means whatever was on top now is going to go on the bottom. Like these two numbers switch spots. So that's going to be 6 on top and 5 on the bottom. So they're flipping. And they switch the sign. So this first fraction was positive. So I'm going to switch from positive to a negative 6/5. That does not mean both of these numbers need to be negative, just overall the fraction is negative. That's the key for perpendicular. One of the fractions has to be positive and the other one has to be negative. In parallel, they're either both positive or both negative. Okay, so let's look at number 1. So number 1 says, find the equation of the line that goes through point 3, -1 and is parallel to the line y equals -2x plus 12. Now, if I'm seeing that it says, find the equation of the line, and I don't have a graph, that tells me I'm supposed to do point slope. So I'm doing y minus blank equals blank, x minus blank. And this is supposed to be y1 and slope and x1. Okay. And I know that this means, oh, I got to go label my point and my slope. So my point's over here, so this is x1, y1. But it didn't tell me what the slope was. But it did tell me parallel to the line, blah, blah, blah. Now we just learned parallel means that they need to have the same slope. So parallel tells me same slope. Okay, well, what was the slope in this equation? What number was it? Was it -2 or was it 12? Well, we know slope is the number next to the x, so that means it's going to be -2. So that should be my slope that I'm going to use, because I'm supposed to be using the same one that they just gave me right there. So now that I know my x1 and y1 and my slope, I'm going to plug it in. So I'm plugging in y1 we labeled was -1. The slope we just said, oh, is the same as this one, so -2. And x1 was 3. Okay. And I'm supposed to be solving for y because I want to know y equals that kind of equation. Okay. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm checking, do I need to change any double negatives? Negative, negative. Do I need to change that to a plus? Well, let's look at our signs. We got a negative negative right there, so I better change that to a plus. And I look over here, are there double negatives over there? No, so I don't have to change those. So this changes to y plus 1, and this stays negative 2 parentheses x minus 3. Okay, so now I'm still solving for y. I know, oh, I got to get rid of the parentheses first, so that means I got to do this times negative 2 times negative 2 into the parentheses, so negative 2 times x. You would type that in Desmos, negative 2 times 1x. It was negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. This side drops down, stayed the same. And then last step, I need to move the 1 to the other side. So I'm gonna do the opposite. So it said plus 1, so I'm gonna minus 1. Minus 1. And this cancels out. And I'm left with y equals, this drops down. Positive 6 minus 1 is positive 5. So then this is my answer. And I'm double checking. I should have the same slope as the one they gave me, which I did, so that means I didn't make any mistakes in solving. The only thing that's different is this number over here, the y-intercept number. Okay? So that's if they're parallel, you just pick the same slope number and put it in there. Well, if they tell you perpendicular, you're going to have to do something else. So here we go. Find the equation of the line that goes through the point, negative 4, 5, and is perpendicular to this equation. So first thing, they're telling me find the equation of the line. I don't have a graph. That means I'm doing y minus blank equals blank, x minus blank. Okay? With my y1, my slope, and my x1. And I'm going to look up here to label my point. So here's my point over here. So I'm going to label x1, y1. And I need to label my slope. Well, what did they tell me about my slope? They told me it's perpendicular to this equation. So what is the slope in this equation? I see it's 2 over 3. Now perpendicular, if I look back at my notes up here, says I'm supposed to flip the fraction and switch the sign to be perpendicular. Okay. So we're going to flip and switch. Okay. That's what perpendicular means. So my slope right now is 2 over 3. So I need to flip that. So change the numbers, switch spots. So that's 3 over 2. That's a 2. And then I'm switching the sign. So this was positive 2 over 3. So now this one has to be negative 3 over 2. And now that is my slope. And now I'm ready to plug those numbers in. Okay, that is the only new step. All of this we have done before. So my y1 is 5. I plug that in. My slope, I just figured out perpendicular meant this number right here. So I'm going to put negative 3 over 2. And then my x1 was negative 4. And then I just got to solve for y. So I'm going to check, are there any negative negatives that I need to change to a plus sign? I'm checking here. Nope, that's just y minus, so that's good. This has double negatives, so I got to change that to a plus. So now this should say x plus 4. And everything else just drops down. Okay. And then I'm just solving for y. So first thing I got to multiply negative 3 over 2 in here. Okay, so I type this in Desmos, negative 3 over 2 times 1. And I get negative 3 over 2 again with the x. It is important that you put your x. Negative 3 over 2 times positive 4 is negative 6. You would type that in Desmos. Don't do that in your head. And then we're bringing this side down. Equal sign. And then last step, I need to move this naked number to the other side. I have to do the opposite. So it says minus 5, so I'm going to plus 5. Plus 5. Okay, this cancels. This drops down just y equals. We like that. Negative 3 over 2, that does not change, so I put that. Negative 6 plus 5, you type that in decimals, you get -1. And then this is my answer. Okay, so the only thing that's different is they're not just telling you what the slope is. You have to go, like, you have to use, oh, does parallel or perpendicular, does it mean I'm supposed to use the same slope or the flip and switch slope? Okay, so you can go ahead and start your practice.